Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. I've been playing in a fresh game of Dungeons & Dragons, and our party decided to make some custom minis using Heroforge. I've designed, printed, and painted a bunch of these now, and I'm ready to give them my review. I've got some good stuff to say, and some serious criticisms that I think you should be aware of. Alright, Heroforge is one of the companies offering a way to make custom RPG minis. You pick your character's face and build, you dress them up, you give them equipment, and you pose them. Then, if you like what you've made, you can buy prints or digital files of your character. Let's start the review on a positive note. This is fun. The whole character builder runs in a web browser, and it runs pretty well. It reminds me of character creation in a video game, but it's actually a lot better than most video games. I'm counting 47 different races: human, elf, dwarf, all the way to minotaur and frogfolk. For all those races, you can pick male or female. Then, there's a bunch of face options depending on your preferences for nose and chin and cheekbones. Pick a sweet hairstyle, grow a beard, grow a unibrow, maybe even grow some horns or antlers. For your body type, you can pick your height, your weight, and how your character carries that weight. This is all done with sliders. Build, muscularity, bust, waist, belly, booty, curves, arm length, and head size. Then it's time to dress and equip your character. There are options for fantasy, western, sci-fi, modern, and stuff in between. My friends and I are playing a D&D campaign set in Waterdeep, and I was able to find a variety of options for unarmored all the way up to plate mail. In my party, Blake's character Dolan is a cook at the Loaf and Kettle Tavern. We were able to build him with a chef's hat and apron. Raquel plays Penelope Dewberry III. She's a forest gnome with the aesthetics of a garden gnome. A big pointy hat is a key feature of her character. This hat isn't quite what Raquel had in mind, but it's not bad. Overall, we were able to get good representations of our characters, probably better than any pre-made minis that are floating around on the market. There's a bunch of weapons and other equipment that you can put in your character's hands, strap to their back, or hang from their belt. Some of these options were pretty good, and some were a bit limited. There were dozens of options for swords, but for crossbows there was only one option. Two if you include the hand crossbow. Neither of those crossbows are very good. On paper, Chaz and Penny both have crossbows. For Chaz, I left this off the character entirely, and for Penny, Raquel chose to model hers with a different type of bow. In D&D, every character has a pack to haul around their gear and loot. There's only one fantasy backpack in Heroforge though, plus a variant with a bedroll strapped to it. So yeah, I found the equipment options to be okay. Some categories were strong and some were a bit weak. Once you've dressed and equipped your character, you can pose them. There are preset options for the legs, but almost any joint above the waist can be adjusted with sliders. So, for each arm, there's a shoulder twist, bend, and tilt, a clavicle bend and tilt, and an elbow twist. Then, there are 3 more sliders for each wrist. I quite enjoyed making this pose for Dolan. When he's not a cook, he's a rogue. He's also not as young as he used to be, so he's got a variety of aches and pains. Today it looks like his back is acting up again. And finally, you can color in your characters. This is an amazing tool for planning out your paint schemes, and I definitely got some use out of it. I don't think I need to say much more about the character builder. It's free to use on your own browser, so if any of this looks like fun, you can give it a whirl and see if you come up with some designs that you like. Alright, so we got our characters designed and ready to buy. I thought they looked pretty good in the character builder, but I was curious to see how I would feel about them once they were converted to physical minis. The aesthetics of all these Heroforge assets are chunky and exaggerated. Look how far Kavan's belt sticks out from his body. On my big computer screen, this looks strange, but maybe it'll look better on a 1-inch tall figurine. Is this chunky style actually cool? We shall see. My second big question is kinda philosophical. Do these minis have souls? Now here's what I mean by that. Most minis are designed by a talented artist who knows what they're doing. Meanwhile, I know nothing about sculpture or anatomy. I just dressed up a doll and played around with some sliders on my computer. I know I'm a fraud, so maybe my Heroforge characters are frauds too. Maybe these minis will end up looking like hollow-eyed store mannequins. I'll have to print them and paint them to figure out whether or not they have souls. For our characters, I bought them as STL files and did the printing myself. If you don't have a printer or you don't have a friend with a printer, you can pay Heroforge to print your character and send it to you. But it's not cheap. For normal size characters, they have a $20 option and a $30 option. The settings on my home printer should be comparable to the $30 option from Heroforge. The STL files are priced at $8. I ended up buying in bulk, so the files I bought were $4 each. This still adds up though, especially because I wanted a couple of different poses for each character. For some of them, I'm even gonna have costume swaps. Once I have the files, I can print off as many copies of our characters as I want. I can also print them at different scales. We'll get to that in a moment. The process of buying the STL file is not instantaneous. The file needs to get processed before it becomes available for download. The shortest processing time that I experienced was about 2 hours, and the longest was almost 3 full days. The wait time is a mild disappointment, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, we've got our STL file. Let's open it up in Chidubox to slice it and get it ready to print. And here is a big disappointment. Those polygons are huge. In the web browser, the curves on these minis look nice and smooth, but the file you download looks like it's from the PlayStation 2. Printers keep getting better and better, and some of those polygons are gonna be visible. The buttons on Chaz's vest are modeled with nice small polygons, and then right next door is a big ol' flat triangle that's bigger than the buttons. I was always planning on printing out big versions of these characters, so let's look at Chaz printed at double height. Oh yeah, he looks like a D20. Triangles everywhere. Of course, the lower polygon count keeps the file size smaller, but I don't care about that. I want my character to be curved like a human, not curved like a soccer ball. I was able to use a freeware program called Mesh Mixer to brush on some more polygons for the regions that were most problematic. This helped a lot, but it also took a lot of time. I ended up doing this for all the characters, and afterwards I was reasonably happy with how they printed. Once they were printed and painted, I still found some areas that I missed though, and they do vex me. Anyway, moving on, one advantage of printing your own characters is that it's easy to change the scale. Raquel's character Penny is supposed to be a very small gnome. In the character builder, we made her as short as she could be, but I'm still going to print her smaller than the other characters. I printed Chaz at normal size, Dolan 5% bigger, Kavan 15% bigger, and Penny 50% smaller. I think this represents the character descriptions pretty well. In addition to the normal scale, I'm also printing all of these characters at double height so that I can try to paint them with a bit more detail. So yeah, the time has come to dive on in and paint these minis. This is how I really get to know the models and decide whether or not I like them. Together, we're gonna try to figure out whether or not they have souls. Dolan, Penny, Kavan, and Chaz aren't just any party. They're the crew from the 20-Sided Realms podcast. I'm gonna do a painting montage to bring these minis to life. I think the painting footage does a good job of showing the strengths and weaknesses of these figures. While I'm painting, let's play the first few minutes of the campaign to introduce you to the characters that these minis are supposed to represent and the world that they live in. I'll be back in a bit to give the verdict on these Heroforge minis.
We find ourselves on the surface in the magical city of Waterdeep, specifically in the dock section of Waterdeep, and even more specifically in a nice little tavern called the Loaf and Kettle. And as our fantasy camera zooms into the Loaf and Kettle, we see 4 companions, friends, I don't know yet, but definitely 4 humanoids sitting around the table. One of them, obviously a cook, for he wears an apron, and is bringing a pot. Blake, whoa, what is in the pot that Dolan is bringing to the table?
Yeah, you see, the loaf and the kettle specializes in the kettle. It's the big stew kettle, the soup kettle. So they specialize in soups and stews. It's Waterdeep famous because they take bread and they take the middle out of the bread and they put the soup or the stew in the bread. It's the Waterdeep famous bread bowl.
Revolutionizing the soup consumption of the land of Waterdeep. We don't know this now, but years later, this will actually start a terrible war. But we're not going to get to that right now. But that was the familiar voice of Blake. But you are playing someone new in this iteration of the 20-Sided Realms, and I stepped on his name. But why don't you give it to us?
Yeah, I'm playing a Dolan Shingle Splitter. And in addition to making a really tasty onion-based soup inside of a bread bowl, you understand that Dolan, he's not a young man anymore, but he's not an old man, okay? And he isn't physically what he used to be. And what he used to be was a bit of a rogue. He wasn't necessarily a bad guy or a murderer, but he had the ability to get things and steal them for people who paid him. And he's put on a little bit of weight. The thieving leathers don't fit anymore, so he's kind of changed that all out for a cooking apron and a friendly smile.
So he's a man with a past. And you see that pass in his eyes. But there is a kindness to your face.
Absolutely.
And you seem to have really found your own in this new role as the cook in the loaf and kettle. So the first bread bowl that you heap a steaming cup of onion stew into is a diminutive figure. That's how you say that word, I'm sure. And a very small gnome accepts this massive bread bowl filled with probably enough stew to you could survive a week on this portion.
Feed tens of gnomes.
Absolutely.
Tons of gnomes.
And this is a new voice we are bringing. This is Raquel, who will be playing...
I am Penelope Dewberry III, but you can just call me Penny. I am a proud, adventurous, young 100-year-old gnome ranger. Survival expert, lover of the wild and animals, and on what we might call gnome springer, on a bit of a quest myself.
Yes. You've left the safety of your forest home to find an essential companion for your ranger's journey on your Gnomestetter. The most interesting or distinctive feature, I think, is the large conical hat that Penelope always is wearing.
It's very important, extremely important.
Yeah, not only for to help people not stepping on you while you're walking in the street, it adds much needed height and visibility to you. I'm sure it also has some important cultural notes for the gnomish people.
A gnome is given their cap very, very young. We are never to take it off other than bathing and sleeping. And it's actually very important for protecting us in the woods. If any sort of small twig or large leaf was to fall on me, it would help it slide right off the top of my head. So it's actually very important for safety reasons.
Form, function, and beauty all wrapped up into one perfect conical head covering. The next person that Dolan serves is, it is a mighty figure. A massive man who in dark contrast to Penelope, this bread bowl seems like merely a cup in this mighty barbarian's hand. A familiar voice, Ed. Who will you be playing in this adventure?
Hey, I'm going to be playing Kavan the Mighty, and he's a barbarian. He's searching. His tribe was destroyed. That he knows
Oh, he's
Oh,
from the
no.
far north.
Yeah, yeah. His tribe was destroyed, and he's been on the trail of some drow, and it led him here, and now he's stopped because he's ran out of supplies, and he needs to rest up, eat, and maybe continue on his adventure.
Truly is a fish out of water. This noble barbarian northern tribesman seems out of place in the hustle and bustle. But you have found some companions to find solace. I think you found your first place of safety was inside the loaf and kettle.
Oh, yeah.
With the delicious taste of this onion soup.
The thing is that whenever we have 1 day old, 3 day old, 7 day old food, I could just give them to Kavan the Mighty, and he'll eat them down no problem.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like part dog, part garbage disposal, part human shield if need be, if things get really bad.
And luckily at a greatly reduced price.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes things
Not
get
free.
Things get a little rowdy in here, and I've helped clear up some of the riffraff.
Yeah, you easily became a useful figure in the loaf and kettle. Because
that's
the loaf
the thing.
and kettle, yeah.
That's the thing. You wouldn't think it, but sometimes the soup flows freely and people get really, really loosened up. And, it gets a little crazy sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you add capers.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss, and also you don't want to be at caper night.
Yeah.
The loaf and kettle is located in the dock ward, known as the less savory part, shall we say, of the mighty city of Waterdeep. Waterdeep has quite a varied, shall we say, stations of different cuts of life. There is some definite class divide in the city that can be found. But you find a solace here in the dock ward, and there is a young man at the table. You might say out of place, but with the craziness of the varied people that are already at this table, how could anyone be out of place? But there's a young man with flowing golden locks that are always perfectly coiffed, and a new voice that we're bringing. Brent, who will you be playing?
Well, I'll be playing Chaz Quartermain. So I am a teenage schoolboy, a bit of a troublemaker, a bit of a trickster, but overall fun guy. And until recently, I was attending a prep school up on the outskirts of Neverwinter, but unfortunately somebody burned down the school recently, so right now Chaz is on a little bit of a break, kind of a spring break sort of thing, while they rebuild the school up there. And yeah, came down to hang out down with these folks, seeing the world a little bit, maybe getting away from a few questions and inquisition sort of thing. But, I always did like bread bowls, and so I'm right at home here in the loaf and kettle making new friends. And now this is totally unrelated to the alleged arson, but Chaz has recently discovered that he has some magic within him. He is a wild magic sorcerer, and he's trying to get control of it, because if he can control it, that'll really help with his kind of fun-loving attitude, making old Dolan smell like Vicks Vapor Rub, and, making other people smell like farts. And every once in a while, he's got this other spell, cantrip really, called Bonfire, and that's a lot of fun too. So
Fire's super fun.
Fire is fun.
A good question. Does Chaz have any elven heritage? Is he...
I mean, he's full human.
Full human, okay.
Yeah.
He's
his
so
parents,
beautiful that
like,
sometimes,
Yeah, his parents hang out with elves sometimes, I think. They're over in Silvery Moon. I mean, Chaz really doesn't see his parents much. He doesn't know if they love him per se, but they, the checks for the prep school are there on time every time. So room, board, education, back before the school burned down, all of that was there for the taking. But now Chaz is kind of off with his more meager allowance, kind of buying cheap bread bowls and figuring out what's next.
Speaking of money, that actually brings us to the current time. After Dolan has served up these bread bowls, he has something he wants to bring up to his fellow companions.
Okay, guys. You guys have known me now for, Kavan, we've been here a couple months together. Penelope, Chaz, a few weeks here. I haven't told you guys much about my past when I was a younger man. I may have made associations and contacts with people who might be a little bit dangerous. And now, I'm not a bad guy, but I used to do things for bad people. And I came to Waterdeep 15 years ago and put a mustache on my face, hoping no one would find me. But the other day, someone was in the kettle and loaf that I hadn't seen in a long time. And they didn't recognize me, probably because of my mustache. And it's been 15 years and about 45 pounds. But I kind of need to get out of town. And I need to get some money for that. And if I remember correctly, I heard there might be an opportunity to make some money. Is that right, DM Travis?
Absolutely. You heard of a man who has been asking for some help.
Okay, hopefully you enjoyed that little snippet. That was a shameless plug for the 20-Sided Realms podcast. TSRP is available wherever you get podcasts. And remember, podcasts and mini painting go great together, like stew and bread bowls. I also wanted to play that clip to remind folks how much fun RPGs can be and how integral the characters are to the whole experience. I've now spent many hours with the minis for these characters, and I'm ready to review them. If you were watching me paint, I bet you saw some of the same things that I did. I found some new flaws, but I also found some new reasons to like these minis. My overall verdict is actually pretty positive. I mentioned the chunky design as something I was worried about, but you know what? At this scale, it absolutely works. Everything on the screen seems oversized and exaggerated, but when you shrink it down to 1 inch tall, it looks great. Everything printed well, and all the bits are thick enough to be durable. Kavan's sword and muscles have a ton of character, and the expression on his face is clearly readable. Now let's talk about some of the flaws I noticed. Posing the minis works pretty well, but some of the shapes do get a bit distorted. It's easy to see here on Dolan. The metal rings on the rogue harness are supposed to be circles, but with this pose, most of them are all stretched out. You can see something similar with his pouches, too. It's not surprising, but the character builder just doesn't know what stuff is supposed to stretch and what stuff is supposed to stay solid. Even so, I actually really like these Dolan minis. I love his gear, and I love the poses we gave him. If anything, those little stretching flaws kinda add to the charm. I think the Dolan and Kavan minis are great. They were a lot of fun to paint, and I think that the act of painting them helps to give them that soul. They started out as digital mannequins, but after spending a couple hours painting each model, they ended up being minis that I really connect with. On the other hand, the Chaz and Penny models turned out a bit bland. It's probably my fault for giving Chaz a sweater vest. That never ends well. I may need to start looking around in our game for some snazzy sorcerer gear. That'll give me an excuse to design a different mini for him. Wish me luck. On that topic, if you do decide to give your mini new gear or a different facial expression, you'll need to spend full price on a new Stl file. It would have been nice if you could buy alternate versions of your character for half price or something, but that's not the case. Oh, also, if you're gonna do printing yourself, I suggest buying the Stl file without a base. It'll probably be easier to print that way. So yeah, on the whole, I think some of these minis turned out great, and some of them turned out okay. We were able to make a decent version of our party using Heroforge. Well, Heroforge plus the time I spent smoothing things out in Mesh Mixer. As we keep playing and getting to know our characters a bit better, I'll keep looking for alternative models. I'm gonna play around with some competitors like Eldritch Foundry and Dragon's Forge. For now though, my verdict is that Heroforge is a decent option for making custom minis to represent your party. We've got some solid minis here, and I'm excited to keep going with our adventure. The 20-Sided Realms Podcast Waterdeep Edition. The 20-Sided Realms Podcast. Available wherever you get your podcasts. Okie dokie, that's it for this time. Thanks so much for watching.